processor made it into this thing, so we have that. Since it doesn't look like we're going anywhere, well, we are going somewhere, alarmingly fast actually. But since we're not busy other than that, here's a couple of facts. He's not just a regular moron. He's the product of the greatest minds of a generation, working together with the express purpose of building the dumbest moron who ever lived. And you just put him in charge of the entire facility. Good, that's still working. Hey, just in case this pit isn't actually bottomless, do you think maybe you could unstrap one of those long fall boots of yours and shove me into it? Just remember to land on one foot.
While making Portal 2, we explored our way through vast quantities of reference material. Inspirations included photos of NASA's Apollo and Shuttle programs, CERN's particle accelerators, both modern and obsolete, industrial robots, derelict Soviet space shuttles, overgrown temples, Brussels metro stations, seedy American motels, junkyards filled with rocketry equipment, Chinese apartment blocks under construction, Polish shipyards, neutrino detectors deep underground in nickel mines, corporate headquarters from a variety of eras, commercial nuclear reactors, experimental fusion reactors, rain-sodden book depositories in Detroit, peculiar cameras, forgotten space probes, you name it.
The size of the gigantic transition seal lock was a happy accident. We knew the connection between the old Aperture and the new Aperture had to be a big set piece. The first model built was about 5 times bigger than everyone expected, but people started to like it. We joked that it should be a bullet point on the Portal 2 box. Features the biggest door in games ever! We decided it would be fun to play with the player's expectations, and put a puny-looking door behind it, along with a few small props.
The lake map marks a total reset to the aesthetics and scale of the environments up to this point in the game. You come into the underground cave compressed, and as you progress further into the map, your eye is drawn upwards by the elevator tower, sparking cables, falling debris, and finally the test spheres which recede vertically into nothingness. This looking upwards gives the player a sense of the vastness of Aperture before GLaDOS, and a visual sense of the daunting climb they will have to make to get back to Wheatley. The open areas encourage the player to explore their surroundings and take a break from the intensive puzzle solving of the test chambers.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Aperture Science. Astronauts, war heroes, Olympians, you're here because we want the best. And you are it. So, who is ready to make some science?
I am.
Now, you already met one another on the limo ride over, so let me introduce myself. I'm Cave Johnson. I own the place. That eager voice you heard is the lovely Carolyn, my assistant. Rest assured, she has transferred your honorarium to the charitable organization of your choice. Isn't that right, Carolyn?
Yes, sir, Mr. Johnson.
She's the backbone of this facility. Pretty as a postcard, too. Sorry, fellas. She's married. To science.
This chapter gave us a great opportunity for visually telling the backstory of Aperture Science. We accomplish this with signs, props, and materials. In this area, we get a glimpse of what Aperture Science must have been like in its heyday. We used rich, warm colors and materials like carpeting and marble to indicate that Aperture had a lot of money at one time. Cave Johnson and his staff were just starting out in their enterprise, and everyone was eager to do science. This stands in contrast to the stark, cavernous environment outside and the materials you see in Aperture Lab from later decades. As the player makes their way through more recent areas of the lab, the materials become cheaper, with an abundance of plastic and linoleum showing that Aperture had fallen on harder times and could no longer build high-quality offices for its workers.
They say great science is built on the shoulders of giants. Not here. At Aperture, we do all our science from scratch. No hand-holding. All right, let's get started. This first test involves something the lab boys call Repulsion Gel. You're not part of the control group, by the way. You get the gel. Last poor son of a gun got blue paint. All joking aside, that did happen. Broke every bone in his legs. Tragic, but informative. Or so I'm told.
Similar to the way the student game Narbacular Jop became the original Portal, the paint mechanics in Portal 2 come from a student game Tag: The Power of Paint. The Repulsion Gel in Portal 2 is modeled after the bounce paint from Tag, but was redesigned to fit better within Portal. The original bounce paint always bounced the player at a fixed height and activated whenever the player touched the paint. We changed the Repulsion Gel to reflect the player's velocity such that they will bounce back up to the height that they fell from. This mechanic lends itself better to puzzles involving portals because players have to think about gaining and preserving height. We also changed the repulsion gel to only activate if the player jumps off of or falls onto the gel. This was done because players would often accidentally walk onto a repulsion gel that they didn't see and then trigger an unwanted bounce. This was a particularly nasty problem in Portal 2 because the player couldn't get rid of paint once it was applied, whereas in Tag the player can erase paint at any time they want.
For this next test, we put nanoparticles in the gel. In layman's terms, that's a billion little gizmos that are going to travel into your bloodstream and pump experimental genes and RNA molecules and so forth into your tumors. Now, maybe you don't have any tumors. Well, don't worry. If you sat on a folding chair in the lobby and weren't wearing lead underpants, we took care of that too.
We had to come up with old-looking versions for all the important gameplay props, such as button panels, doors, cubes, basically everything the player could interact with. We came up with this fictional character, Janitor Bob. He'd be the guy who had to maintain all of old Aperture. A guy who doesn't understand anything about science, but can fix everything with duct tape and a screwdriver. He would use everything he could get his hands on. The result might not look pretty, but it would work. So whenever we got stuck designing props for Chapter 3, we'd ask ourselves, well, how would Bob build it?
Oh, in case you got covered in that repulsion gel, here's some advice the lab boys gave me. Do not get covered in the repulsion gel. We haven't entirely nailed down what element it is yet, but I'll tell you this, it's a lively one, and it does not like the human skeleton.